So I am Eva, Dr. O, my students call me because I have a very long last name. And I have been here since fall 2001 was my first semester. Some of you are laughing because you were still in college. Yes, I get that. So I've been here from where we used to lecture. We were actually much more severe back in the day to a much more relaxed environment right now. And so I've seen a lot of changes happening in pedagogy. And so a lot of the themes from this morning is using these cool new technologies to interact with students. And we're trying to get to a point where our super high stressed out students, we need to be fair and understanding where they are right now, but we have to be flexible and still maintain our high standards. So it's kind of a push-pull from like the old-timey, I'm going to stand there and pour all my wisdom into you, which doesn't work anymore, to the more modern, just kind of very casual chit-chatting around, where also I teach pre-meds in the biology department. You really want me to give them a lot of information so they don't kill you in 10 years when they're a doctor. So there's a higher stakes thing that is happening as the bio department is giggling. There is a handout that Addie is putting around. I thought it'd make it a little bit more interactive, possibly. Uh, so, oh yeah, if you don't have a pen, Addie's got a pen in the back over there. All right, so quick reflection. Teaching traditional biology, lecturing. All right, when's the last time you crammed for an exam? And what do you remember from the course now? Yeah, nothing. An amber, empty bubble of, I remembered it for the exam. Yeah. Stress. Yes. Stress, anxiety, sleepless nights, an extra cup of coffee. I remember one time very vividly where I really had to go to the bathroom like 10 minutes into the exam. You know, it was like an hour and a half exam. So, you know, these are all the things you remember. It's not a good thing. So we're trying to get away from that cramming mentality, which is very pedagogically, you know, like I'm going to tell you what things are. And we're going to move into androgyny, or I can't even say it, andragogy, or adult learning. So our students are at this weird little interface between, are they kiddos, K through 12, or are they adult learners? And we're definitely at that interface where we need to get them, if they are not yet adult learners, we need to get them into the adult learning world. And so Malcolm Knowles is the fella who in the 1970s came up with andragogy as opposed to pedagogy. And it was really funny because I was trying to make my slides prettier because I'm a bio person. It's like just the facts, please. And I'm German, so it's even worse on top of that, like very like linear sequential. And so I asked chat to like make me something prettier. And it did everything about Michael Knowles, not Malcolm Knowles, because it thought that I had done a typo when I did the prompt, right? And so it was like, okay, yeah, no, Malcolm Knowles. So his question was always, what do you want to learn? Now, my anatomy class, I'm really not going to ask that. I'm going to tell you what you need to know. But what I loved about Justin's presentation, what was the question your chatbot asked? What was the prompt? It was, what is your question? What do you want? That was the prompt from your chatbot. So it was using andragogy, where it's like, what are you interested in? And I mean, my discipline, there's going to be a little bit of like, I need to give you the facts before we can actually get into what are you actually interested in. So that is kind of how andragogy is different, is we're trying to get on a student-centered, trying to get them to be more engaged. And that's what all these presentations have been about. So they want to know, why do we need to know this? Why is this relevant? Like, I always hear from the biochem students, why do I need to know the pKa of all the amino acids? Like, well, you don't, you're probably gonna look it up. But what I really need you to do is learn how to memorize. So it's not that the fact of the pKas, it's that you learn the process of memorization, because when you have 150 prescription options for your patient, you need to know what the differences are. So why do we need to know? You need to have the adult learner wants to have agency over what they're learning. They want to have some choices. It's like, well, I really love neurobio and I really hate the renal system. So can I do more of one and less of the other? Totally. You're going to learn a little bit about the kidney, but you are going to learn, whatever your interests are. we need to focus on their prior experience as a resource. And I think we saw that with the chatbot, with the Genially, right? All of these is like, start where what you already know, and then let's go from there. Problem solving is the big one. Our students, well, okay, back it up. My students have a very hard time connecting dots and solving problems. They're so used to being online and like watching this cute little video for 30 seconds, and then this video for 30 seconds, and then this video for 30 seconds. And they have a hard time connecting why that was in their feed. And they don't even know, they're just kind of playing along. And then the last one is the internal motivation. Like, how do you get them to want to do this? So I love the Genially thing, right? I'm trying to think how I can do like an anatomy lab, escape room, horror room. Yeah, that would be really, really fun. So it's a little bit of a mind shift set to get to andragogy. And I realize that many of our students are just not ready for that. They have always been in a pedagogy mindset. They have always been passive not always, but generally are more passive consumers of information. Sit back and entertain me, right? Whereas the chatbot or the Genially, it's not like, okay, it is entertaining, but you're driving it. You're inside of it. You're evolving into it. One of my colleagues in the biology department has several exams during the semester, and they're long and they're hard to write. So he recycles the exams on a 3-year cycle. And so this last year, he was sharing with us that exam 1, 12 years ago, the average or the median on the exam was like a 78, 79. 9 years ago, the median on that exam, the 3-year cycle, 78, 79. 6 years ago, 74. 3 years ago, 72. This year, what was it, 67, guys? My bio colleagues, yeah. So it was pretty level, and then a complete drop off. Same professor. It's a sophomore level class. I mean, yeah, bio advances, but it doesn't advance that much in the basics, right? So same professor, same lectures, same exam, and we'd see this absolutely precipitous decline that we see in our students. And I noticed it in my class, so this is just a remedial example. All right, so I tell my students, I give them all these amazing lecture topics and connect the dots for them. And it's kind of that my analogy is, if I were to talk to you guys and ask you, okay, this is gonna draw a shape. What shape do you think it is? You don't have to say it out loud. All right, here it goes. What's it gonna be? What's it gonna be? Circle, circle. Ooh, but I didn't complete the dot. So then I asked my students, what do you think it is? And my top students like, circle, definitely circle. I'm like, excellent. And then I have students like, could be a pizza with a slice missing, could be a cell with a bleb, it could be like, it could turn into a star, maybe it's just the center of a spiral. I mean, on and on and on. You're like, Occam's razor tells us it's gonna be a circle. And then I explain to them, the logic, and everyone's like, oh yeah, okay, I see why it should be a circle. All right, so then I'm like, all right, next topic. What is this circle? What is this going to be? And I move it just a little bit, right? I leave out one other fact, and then they can't. They can't. It's still like, it's a pizza, it's a whatever. And you're like, okay, so something is happening with our students where connecting the dots is not as natural as it is for us older people. So, and it's pretty amazing. And one of my colleagues, not in the biology department, was lamenting, students want the degree, but they don't want to learn. So that is what, and I was like, okay, so our job has turned into making them want to learn. So we have to do a pretty good reassessment. And why is this happening? Did we do this book a couple years ago, Constantine? I don't remember if we did or not. I know we talk about it in the biology department all the time. So The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, The Great Rewiring. It's a thing. In psychology and biology, we can tell you this is an absolute thing. Being exposed to your cell phone during that critical neural developmental stage, the iPhone came out, and that's our current group of college kids got the iPhone at age 12 during that critical wiring of social networks, of learning networks, and it has absolutely rewired the brain. So when we're talking about fairness, we have to realize that these students have been rewired. I'm not saying it's good or bad or indifferent, it just is a fact. And so We can't judge them. This has happened. There are parents who are now pushing back and like taking away cell phones and putting limits and all that kind of stuff on there, but it has happened and it's in our students and we have to understand that that is there. And so we have to be fair and we have to be flexible. My kids still need to memorize all their anatomy. They need to know how a kidney works. They need to know how a lung works. But the way I present that and the way they interact with that, that needs to be different from the standard just stand up here and lecture type of situation. All right, so how do we do that? Well, one of the things that we were, again, talking about, we had a big lecturer meeting the other day, and we're kind of complaining about this. What we realize is that the more we do for the students, the more helpless they are because they're not engaging at all. So exam review sheets, that was like my bread and butter in college. It's like, that's how I'm learning, right? What were the important points after each lecture? What do I need to do? What do I need to know? So the highly annotated PowerPoints. And then we complain that they have no ability to read and understand. Well, you just read it all to them. Why should they have to read if you're just reading it all to them? Like, it doesn't make any sense. We have a big love-hate relationship with recorded lectures. Some students use them as intended, where they're interacting in class, then use it as a backup. Others are like, I'll watch them later the night before, and then they never do. And so it actually, I have done the stats because I'm a bio geek and I do those sort of things. It makes it worse when they have recorded lectures. The top students will always do great. My B students will fall to C's because it's a crutch and they haven't actually done the work of learning. The other thing that I've been doing in class, and I still am going to do it, is go over, like when the exam, when I actually use case studies in my classes, so I go over the correct answers in case studies. Some students just walk out. Like, they don't want to know. They don't want to go over it. So I'm like, wow, okay. As opposed to back in the day, my professors never went over the exam. If I wanted to know, I had to go to office hours. And I had to interact with the material, and I had to learn about it. So quick reflection. What else are you doing for students that you had to do for yourself in college? Yes. Yeah, so the summarizing, yeah, exactly. That was that interaction, right? So absolutely, yeah, what are you think? Yeah. No, no, not yet. Yeah, maybe later. Yeah, maybe later. The other one, I think, Rachel, were you the one that mentioned this? Or maybe it was Alex, I can't remember. Remember we used to have day planners and we had to write things in them? And then when you wrote 4 things on one little tiny square, you're like, oh no, that was not the word I used. And then we're like, ooh, and then the 2 days before that, I better make notes. And then the 2 days before, I better make notes. Right now, it's on Canvas, which I do use calendar, don't get me wrong. But they're like, oh my God, I woke up this morning and I had 4 things due. And I'm like, because they didn't have to put it in there, right? Everybody's nodding. Yeah, you know what I mean? And you can tell them and you can say it and you can send announcements and you can, but they didn't have to physically put it in a calendar and realize they had 4 things due tomorrow. Like, it is really quite amazing. All right, what else do we have? Yeah. Oh my God, that is so true. Which is actually a good thing because, like, my son's a sophomore at a big state university, and it's hilarious because their math is so bad. They will do anything for like an exam point, and you're like, that's like 0.002% of your final course grade, right? But they will do anything for like a bonus point on an exam. But you're absolutely right. And like, I have told my students, well, now I use specs grading, but I'm like, just do a weighted average, and they're like, what? Like, okay, you're a pre-med and I know you've passed Calc 2. So I know you can do a weighted average. And then you explain to them what that is, right? Well, your students might not have had Calc 2 yet, but they're in Calc 1 when they're in your class. So, all right, so we're infanticizing them. We're turning them into not being self-driven, self-motivated, like being responsible for their own learning by doing all these things for them. I'm still going to do some of these things for them because that's how I roll. Because I have a 22-year-old in college and I hear his side of the things. Okay, so I went through and I'm like, okay, what do students need to be able to do? What do I really want them to know? Because as a physician, they can look like, if they're like, oh, is it Ozempic or Opempic. I don't know. I just made that one up. Like they can look that up, right, pretty quickly. So maybe less of the facts, but they do need to know, to your point, enough when AI is wrong. And those of you who are on the Coalition of the Willing chat heard my horror story about my students last spring semester, where 70% of them failed the final because they didn't realize that ChatGPT was wrong. There is going to be a set amount of rote memorization, which is why I'm loving this Genially thing. I want them to follow an argument logically. Connect that final dot, and I will give you lots of examples, but I'm not going to give you the infinite amount of examples you're going to come across in your career. So you have to be able to put it together. They're like, well, how are we supposed to know? You didn't tell us. I'm like, right. It's called applied learning. You got to figure that part out. I want them to learn from their mistakes. So back to, I took my paper and you've written and you've circled and you've starred and put smiley faces, and then they take it and stick it in the bottom of the backpack or in the trash can, right? That is not what we want them to do. I want them to be able to apply knowledge in a new situation. That's for my pre-meds. So not every patient's going to be the same, but they're all going to have similar underlying conditions, and then they're going to have an extra little tweak, and you got to figure that out. So applying that information where you don't have to memorize every little thing, there's no way to do it. And then the last one that I've kind of put in there is I need them to start getting a little bit of a thicker skin. I need them to become a little bit grittier, resilient, growth mindset, whatever term you want to use. There's a lot that all say the similar thing, that it's okay to fail if you learn from those mistakes. And they are not resilient. We heard about that with the mental health talk today. They're having a hard time. And we need to get a way for them to become a little bit more resilient. So give them lots of like low stakes little assignments where they can fail and it's not like devastating to their grade. That's kind of where the grittiness comes in. All right, so think about what you need to do in your discipline. So in Spanish languages, for example, they need to memorize. They do. You need to have your vocabulary. Same in biology. You better know your vocabulary. But maybe that is not something that you need in your discipline. Maybe in philosophy, there's less memorization. You need to know a few words, but not that many. And then for me, this was the hardest one. How much volume of information do they really need to know versus being able to apply information? Because you only have so much time in a classroom. And so you need to apply it, and so think about what other things that you might in your discipline find important. And then is that really what you're doing in your lectures? Or are you just throwing volumes of data at them? Volumes and volumes. All right, so here's some solutions. So my son's business law class, he is, again, large state university. There's about 50 kids in his class. And his professor told him last semester, you cannot earn an A unless you do bonus activities. And each correct answer in class, so he'd have like a chat in class, and then if you answered correctly, not just like made your voice heard and it was complete garbage, but like had a thoughtful response, then you got a point. Add it to your exam. But actually up to 5 points, right now we actually can move a little bit, right? Now you are getting from a B+ to an A- situation. So that was one thing. And then the other one is come to my office hours, go over the exam, no point grubbing. Cannot point grub, but let's go through and what did you do wrong? How can you do better? And he said that his professor actually started out with, tell me how you studied. Because our students' idea of studying is not my idea of studying. Like I had one student say, I studied 17 hours for this weekly case study. How am I supposed to do that? I'm like, well, what did you do for studying? I rewatched your lecture 3 times. I'm like, well, that's really not studying. But they think it is, right? They're like, yeah, that's not active. It's just passive, like drooling on yourself while you're chomping potato chips. No, it's not. So how did you study? And let's figure out a better way. And then my son was like, oh, and then I went to my accounting prof, and she was great. She went over it. So they actually learn a technique that they can transfer skills to other classes, which was great. He did really nice last semester. Good job, kid. Anyway, Dr. Wright is sitting right here, so I'm picking on her too. I'm in charge of our program assessment for biology. And we've been doing pretty good. I mean, we write our own slows and then grade ourselves, We failed miserably last year. I mean, it was so bad. So we did have to kind of sit down and do a whole department reevaluation, especially in our intro bio classes. And so Dr. Wright, bless her heart, awesome, went to no lecture PowerPoint slides. 0. In biology, you know how many diagrams we have of like cells doing stuff and macromolecules doing stuff? Nuh-uh. She used whiteboard app, right, and recorded in Panopto, and then hand drew out everything. And then in our debrief we had the other day, the students loved it. And I sat in on Rachel's classes, and just to see how this would work, because I'm like not envisioning how this is going to work in my classes. But before she started, she was like, had the usual announcements, and I think you did quickly near the end that day or whatever it was. But they're all like doing their like crossword puzzles and playing their video games. And as soon as she put up the whiteboard app, everything went away. And they all pulled out their styluses, and a lot of them were on pen and pencil and paper, and they're following. She was teaching them how to take notes, and how do you take apart the chapter, and how do you learn, actively learn what's going on. And I think the biggest issue I think that you're going to add next year is like some of the more difficult diagrams, because Dr. Wright is amazing, but she's not an artiste. And so she's going to like at the very end be like, oh, and here's the actual diagram. Let me just show you that one real quick, right? So it's a little bit prettier, right? Was that kind of the major feedback, you think? Yeah. A really bad giraffe. Yes. Oh man, I once drew something and it looked like a sock monkey. And then like I started laughing so hard, I couldn't finish lecture. So anyway, so the students do have their figures and diagrams in the textbook, but it forces them to actively participate in class. And Rachel, you were saying it was so great because when you like moved the whiteboard app, you could hear everybody like flipping the page, like 200 students going whoosh all at the same time, right? So it's really, like, we have to go back to teaching them how to do this stuff. Now, I don't know if you covered as much material as you would normally, and no, right, you got to cut out a big chunk because you have to teach them how to learn. All right, so that's in a big class. Now, I teach upper level pre-meds, anatomy, physiology, and a bioethics seminar. And I use something called specifications grading. This is classic andragogy. Oh, it's question time. Okay, 2 minutes. Okay, so specs grading, and I had to remove a bunch of stuff from lecture. All right, here's specs grading in a nutshell. Mark Kearns is your guru of specs grading right there in the center. You can either have students do higher hurdles or more hurdles. Everything is graded pass, fail. And you tell them exactly what it takes to pass. They have a checklist. And then if the more they do, the better their grade gets. And then some of them you can see like more difficult or more less difficult. And so you can kind of go through. Or you can go really difficult. They do less things that are harder. But the specifications is like, what do they need to know for your class? And be very, very specific about it. And at first I'm like, oh, I'm giving them the answer key. Yes, give them the answer key. What do you actually want? And I don't give them like the actual words you want them to write, but I have examples if you guys want to see it. Mark does too. But yeah, be very specific. So can you write 4 sentences that are correct about the kidney? The first sentence, can you tell me the functional unit? And then, is your grammar correct? Like, it's literally a checklist just like that. And it's very straightforward, and they either can and cannot do it. All right, since I only have so the last part is, let's transform your assignment. Figure out which one of your assignments you want to do. What do you want to transform? What's problematic about what you're currently doing? Is your grading a nightmare? Do you want to use a chat AI assistant? Which andragogy principles could you apply? Agency, students choose your paper topic from list, learning contracts, experience-based. So I do case studies, but like the chatbot or the Genially, right? So it's an experience-based, like you're into it. You're not just like sitting there drooling on yourself. And then problem-centered. So I have students coming in there for their more difficult A. It's like, oh, I saw this patient when I was shadowing. That's your problem centered. Tell me about that patient. What happened? And then trying to get that intrinsic motivation, specs grading works like a charm for that. It's not point grubbing. I don't get any point grubbing at all. It's all like, we're going to do it. All right, and then redesign your assessment. So that's your handout, and we can talk about that over lunch since I'm out of time. I'm so sorry, Constantine, that I went over. All right, there we go. All right, here's further readings. Highly recommend both of these books. All right, so sorry.
If we have any questions, we have time for 1 or 2 questions.
Oh, yeah.
Could you elaborate on how you use, I mean, you mentioned their chatbot and then also software, but like your satisfaction, and then do you see students really being more, I don't want to say inspired, but enthusiastic about it?
Yeah,
because they feel that it helps them.
Yeah, so specs grading, my top students, first of all, I should back up and say medical school, dental schools, and optometry schools have gone to specs grading years ago because it's adult-based education. So I'm teaching the ones that are going to med school, dental school next year. So my top students love it. They finally figure out how they need to do the next level up. My bottom students hate it because to pass, even the small assignments, you have to do A minus B plus work. So you can't dribble along with like a C minus, D plus, and then point grub and get away with it. So they don't like it at all. But my A students absolutely love it. I used to do these open book, open note, and I ask any doctor I see, like, tell me about your coolest patient. Those are Google proof because it's something weird and bizarre and unique. Google will never find it, or Chat GPT proof or whatever it is. But the Chat GPT and Claude in particular were getting smart enough last spring that they were able to solve some of the puzzles. And then I asked Claude, how do I make this AI proof? And it told me, and I told my students I did this, and 80% of them failed the final because they didn't listen to me. And Chat totally hallucinated, and it was not a good ending because they all thought they were A's and then they ended up with B's, right? And it was disastrous for a lot of students. So, but you can warn them all you want. So now I'm going to pencil and paper in class. And again, bimodal, the top students love it. The bottom students are just like, what are you doing to me? So, but my B students, they're getting into it. They're figuring it out. And they're the ones that are kind of on that bubble and you want to pull them up. And you can pull them up with the specs rating.